Oh, there she is.
Yeah.
Okay, hi. My name is Essmaa Litim. I'm born and raised in Boston. I am an author, a poet, a visionary. I am a student. Not currently, but I was. But I'd like to continue.
We're always students.
We're students for life.
Yeah.
And I guess a little bit about myself. I just recently published a book. It's about my mother's journey immigrating to the United States. I'm really, really passionate about writing. I am also a poet, so I'm really a poet first and foremost. I am very passionate about being who I am. Like, I think it's really important in being yourself and not following the footsteps of other people. Being your most authentic self, I think, is really, really important. And I just love to be able to sort of bring real life social issues to either the work I do, the art, in any art form. So my poetry, through my social justice, my nonprofit organization. So I really just, I want to help build my community through various art forms. Yeah, that's really who I am. I'm Algerian, if I didn't say that before. We're very proud people. And I love music. So I guess that's, yeah.
Oh, so you're like on the perfect platform. We like stand for all of that. So that's dope. Let's jump into our first question. And are you hood grown? And if so, how does that influence your aesthetic?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in East Boston. So I'm a Boston girl. I'm a city girl. I hold that near and dear to my heart. No matter where I go, it's always, that's where from the bean. This is what it is. And I'm very passionate about issues I see within my own community. And actually, I didn't allude to this earlier, but just talking about like construction in the city, for example, like I'm really huge on talking about like the gentrification that's going on in the city and how it impacts the locals and how I've seen it impact people I know. And being from a place where I love it so much, seeing it negatively impact the people who are from this area is really frustrating. And I really try to either raise awareness about it and really trying to make some type of impact and some type of change. So I am hood grown. And it influences my aesthetic because a lot of my art forms, that is sort of surrounded and centered and rooted in the issues I see, like social issues that I see on a daily basis, whether it's something I experience myself or I see other people experiencing them too. And I want to be that advocate and I want to be that ally for them as well.
Oh. So before we jump into like more about your work, just a check-in, like how are you transitioning to our kind of reopen kind of feel in this city as a person and as an artist? Like how is it affecting you, your work? How do you feel about all that?
It's a whirlwind. It is tumultuous. Is it bad to say bittersweet? There's so many emotions that I feel and I felt. And I remember, oh my God, I remember the weekend right before the shutdown officially commenced. Me and my were in New York. And then I remember just seeing Times Square as a ghost zone. And I'm like, we need to get out of here. This feels like the purge. Like, oh, scary. And so we made it back to Boston and literally like 2-3 days after it was like shut down. Like everything down. We all experienced it. And it's one of those times where it's like, it's so grim, but there's some weird like feeling of, I don't want to say comfort, but knowing that everyone's experiencing it at the same time, you never feel alone in that. And as a person, I feel like I went through the emotions probably most people did, of just being locked up, feeling like you have nowhere to go. But at the same time, it also allowed me to work and perfect, not to say it's perfect, but to work on my craft. Because I remember working, my 9 to 5 and just, I have so many passions and dreams. And I used to tell myself, I don't have enough time to like maybe make an open mic, or I don't have enough time to do what I want to do. And I feel like a lot of us, like, we get tired from work, you're overworked, your commute might be really long, and your weekends, you just want to relax, and you think about, you know, self-care, you're not gonna need to care for myself. It's just all this going on. And I used to wish that time would stop. And for the first time, it did. And I remember just thinking to myself, and this is how the book came to be, because I always wanted to write a book. And I remember I told my director before I left my job, this is my passion, and I'm gonna write a book. But it seemed like something I would do later on in life. And time finally stopped, and I had no excuse. And that's when I decided to really tap into it, because I knew that if I didn't, I would regret. And it allowed me to grow as an artist, because I finally did have that time. And I realized that time, again, as you know, a lot of people say, is a construct. And I'm going to sit here and I'm going to focus on my priorities when I can, and when I make time for them. And I guess that's how it's affected me as an artist, and how everything is coming back out. Like, I'm excited because events are coming back up. Open mics are coming back up. People are so excited for community engagement, and being able to gather people again like we used to, that is so heartwarming. It's just, again, tumultuous because you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because the mask mandate's coming back, and you're like, are we going to have to shut down again? Or we just came off of capacity for indoor events, so how is that going to look? And then it's hard to plan for the future when it's so, you know, gray area. We don't know. So it's just a lot of feelings, but honestly, part of it. So
No, I totally feel that. And it's great that you're able to tap into your creativity due to our shutdown. Not everyone had like the mental capacity to do that, but that's awesome that you have. And yeah, we'll see what's to come. And I don't think they'll allow us to shut down due to the economy, not due to, you know, the scare of people. But, you know, that's my own.
Yeah, no, I think that too. I don't think they're gonna fully shut down, but I am interested to see how far they take limitations. And I get it, but it's also something where it's like, all right, like, what's going on?
Yeah, there needs to be a straightforward answer, and we haven't got one at all throughout this whole thing. So, all right, let's get into the art. The reason why we're here. Let's not be just get ourselves stressed out about our upcoming futures. So you touched a little bit about your book, Speechless, and thank you for sharing the first chapter with me. It was really beautiful, and I can't wait to get my hands on a copy so I can finish it up. But can you, just a little backtrack, can you tell me a bit about your mother and why she is your inspiration for like such a big collection of stories, and also just like your first real book? Like that's a big deal for it to be inspired by your mother and for it to be your first one.
Yeah, I remember I used to tell my mom, like, you have a story and I want to write your story. So obviously with her blessing, I was able to really sit down. And it's interesting because it took me 3 to 4 months of interviewing my mother. And so, you know, when you're a kid and you're growing up, like, you see your mom as your mom, right? And you don't really see her as anything else, but your mom is somebody's daughter, right? Someone's sister. She's a friend. She's a best friend to somebody. She is her own person before she is a mother. And so it was so fascinating. I feel like I was learning so much about my own mom that I didn't even know. And honestly, I like, my mom is in her 50s. So it was tough to get her to remember certain things, which is why, again, it did take me a while. So I had to become like a psychologist and like ask questions in so many ways to like tap into her memory. And I was like Googling so many, you know, do all of that, which is kind of funny, but research. But it really allowed me to learn her. And I feel like she was also learning herself in the process, because it's easy to get wrapped up in life so much so you kind of forget your own in a way, especially like growing up. And she's a woman who she doesn't forget who she is. And coming to America for her, like she always stood by who she was, her identity. And it was kind of like this piece of home that she would never let go. She never to this day will let go. And I admire her for that. And I mean, a lot of us, again, are like first generation or immigrants ourselves. I'm one of 5 kids, and my older siblings, my older sister and my older brother, they are immigrants. And so I was the first to be born here. And then my younger sister and younger brother came along after me, and watching my mom just sort of go through what she went through. Like as a kid, you're watching your mom do what she has to do as a mom to just raise her kids. But now that I'm older and I'm looking at her journey and I'm like hearing it firsthand from her, it's like, wow, I always knew you were powerful, but I didn't realize how powerful you were until I got to an age where I could understand that truly. And there isn't any sort of like, sugarcoating anything because you're a kid. And so for me, her story is really, really powerful, not only because it's about immigration, but it's about a person sacrificing everything for their kids, and in turn is investing everything into their kids, because that's what that is. Like their children are so important to that person. And I don't want to I'm like trying to navigate around so I don't like spoiler alert kind of thing.
Yeah, we want people to get the book.
I'm like, how do I properly? But the story is based off of sacrifice and seeing how much she has sacrificed for her kids and her future kids at the time. Especially with my youngest brother, he is autistic, and it's really her journey raising him to the present day. So the last chapter is a very recent story. Literally right before I was gonna publish everything, I was like, wait, I gotta change the ending. So I changed the ending.
Wow.
Something that recently, and then I was like, all right, now it's done.
So dope. So to go a little bit further back, even beyond your or I guess in the middle, you found your love of writing throughout this whole story. And actually the fruition of it happening, not you interviewing your mother, of course. You've been a writer for a while, but when did you fall in love with writing? And I know you said earlier that you always imagined yourself writing a book, and but what made you decide that a book is the best medium to share your mother's story rather than poetry or another writing form?
So I discovered my love of writing when I was about 7 or 8 years old. And I remember my teacher, she had us, it wasn't necessarily a poetry class, but we did a lot of poetry style writing. And I always loved grammar. And I remember I was good. And I remember your girl was getting bullied by friends, and I use that term loosely, for being like a teacher's pet or a nerd or whatever. And it was just something I was so passionate about, and I loved doing it. And it got to a point where the teacher would highlight my work, and I would be embarrassed because I knew people were looking at me crazy. Y'all just upset. But anyways, that is where I discovered my love for poetry and my love for writing and words and wordplay, because I'm a super curious person. I love to learn, and which is why I said earlier I'm a student, because learning new things on a daily basis is really important to me. And anytime I heard a word I didn't understand, I loved that, because I just would pull out my dictionary and write out the definition along the sides of my composition book. And I if that word resonated with me, or if I just somehow really liked that word for some reason, I would write a short poem about it, or have that be the title, and do something with that. And that's sort of how everything's evolved. And to your other question, really, I tend to write about, through my poetry, I tend to write a lot about social issues. And when I'm experiencing something, or when I'm feeling something really, really strong, I love to put it in poetry form, because I want it to be something that people can listen to and it sounds good in their ear. The same when you're listening to rap, rap is poetry, right? It's just over a beat. And the style of it might be a little bit different, the bars and sort of the syllables and the flow, it might be a little bit different, but poetry is what you make of it. So when you listen to music and you hear somebody like, you hear like Kendrick and you're like, wow, that wordplay. And you think deeper into the meaning and you're like, wow, like mind blown. Like, what did, you know what I mean? Like, I like that feeling is what I want to give people. And because I love that feeling myself. And I have written about my mother before through poetry. But I felt a book was necessary because it was able to give me so much space to really highlight her life. I would have been hard to highlight everything she's been through, because this is more than just her story of immigration. This is really a story for people who either maybe have autism or have kids who have autism, or know somebody they love who has autism and is able to either relate, feel like they're not alone, or even if a doctor reads the book and gives them some type of insight, that's very important. So you can read it from so many different perspectives, and take something away from that. And I think that was why I chose to make it a book, because I wanted to include as much as I could to evoke that emotion in whoever is reading it.
So what was your experience creating such personal work? I know you say that a lot of your poetry is around social justice, and of course that is personal to us all because we are dealing with that. But when you're telling the story of your family, it's a very personal thing. And what is the importance of personal work made by artists? Do you feel like it's a form of self-care? Do you feel like it's a almost a way of being vulnerable to your audience? What do you think, what's the biggest takeaways you have from writing such personal work?
I think that when it comes to art form and any type of art form, being as vulnerable as you can gives you that opportunity to connect with somebody who might be feeling the same way. It's hard to be really personal. It's not easy for everyone. It could be therapeutic for people. Like you said, a form of self-care. It could be a chance for you to really showcase raw emotion, your raw talent. And I love when somebody, and I really, really appreciate when someone is super honest and in anything, especially in their art, because you can really feel the genuity in all of that. And I want to be as raw as possible. And again, sometimes it's not so easy. I remember back, what month are we in? We're heading in back in like February. I literally have, that's also back to the other question. I have no idea what month, day it is anymore. But this is a good example. So back in February, my entire family caught COVID. And I mean, we're okay, but my dad ended up catching pneumonia due to COVID. And like he was admitted into the hospital, and it was just a super, super tough time. And I remember just thinking, like, I'm living in a cauchemar, which is French for nightmare. I'm literally like, what the, excuse my French, but what the fuck is happening? Like, I get a phone call from the doctor saying my dad has pneumonia. And I'm like, all right, like, what does this even mean? Because you hear of certain words and you're like, oh, I know what that means, but you're not exactly sure. So I had to do my research. I had to talk to her about it. And for me, the way for me to deal with that was writing. And I wrote a poem about it. And I actually posted a video about it on my Instagram. And for me to do that, like, I write about societal issues, but for me to write about something so personal, like, that took so much out of me. And not only just writing about it, but showcasing it to the world and like doing a video. I remember filming that. I'm like, I want to cry right now. Like, luckily he's okay. This was after the fact, but I was like, I want to cry because these words, like, expressing my feelings, like my personal feelings, especially about my family, and showcasing that to the world. I did that because I knew that it would help people who might be going through the same. And I had a couple people reach out to me who maybe experienced a similar situation, and they said that my words helped them, and it was a way for them to relate, and it really made them happy hearing somebody else sort of talk about it in their, whatever their art form may be. So that's like an example right there, because I I I feel like I don't write about too many personal things. Like personal, I mean like personal, and share it with the world. But the response I got from that was very, very positive and it was very caring. And I really appreciated that. And it was at that moment where I realized that when you just allow yourself to be vulnerable with other people, people appreciate that. And it allows you to grow because you're doing something that you're not used to. And it's sort of, you're growing within yourself, and helping others too. So I think it's important to be vulnerable and to be raw, because that is how people connect.
Right. So you talked a little bit about your nonprofit at the start when you were like giving your intro, which was great. Can you tell me a bit about your nonprofit and what inspires and drives Roya? Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah, Roya. So I guess I'll give you the backstory for Roya. Me and my co-founder, Willette Hayek, she's amazing. We last summer, our anniversary just passed. But last summer, she reached out to me, thank you, about starting something where we have conversations about race, especially within the Arab world, and sort of talking about microaggressions and just facilitating a conversation that isn't really had within the Arab community. And so we're like, yeah, let's go for it. So it was a 5-week Zoom series. It was an anti-racism seminar series that we did. And the response was great. Like, people that we didn't even know showed up, and we had honest conversations. And again, they're not easy conversations, but that's a start. Right. And towards the end, people were asking us what's next, like what's more for you guys. And, you got to think big scale, like what more can we do aside from the Zoom session? And we then, at the time, we were Arabs Against Oppression. That's how we kind of started. But then we realized that that's not as inclusive, because the term Arab can mean so many different things and can look like so many different things, and people might not solely identify as that, racially, or whatever it might be. So we got our nonprofit 501c3 certification, so we're like official, and we then changed our name and recently rebranded to Roya, which is, the root of that is Ru'ya, which means vision in Arabic. So now we call ourselves Roya, because our vision really is to educate people, for advocacy, equity, really trying to make a difference in our communities. We've had community forums before. We had our voter registration training with the national organization, Arab American Institute, where we're registering people to vote for the upcoming mayoral race. We are having a town hall coming up. We're also having an educational series. We have our Starlight Slam event that's coming up September 4th at the Starlight Square in Central Square, Cambridge. It's a poetry event, and our work is really a movement. Our work is really a time where we want to not only engage the community, but really make that impact and really make that difference. I think that it's easy to talk about it, but I think it's also really, really important to make that change and utilize your resources, utilize your connections, because somebody might not be doing as well because they don't have the proper resources, because that advocacy is not there for them. Lack of resources is a problem, and a lot of people don't advocate for themselves or don't know how to, or I think it's so important to have that distribution of resources, because the only way for us to really grow, and if we're talking about generational wealth, like, we're up against people who have been in this country for so many centuries and have that family money. And again, it's not to say like, oh, like, I'm upset because I don't have that. It's like, no, how do we get that? How do we obtain that? And how do we work together for that? Because I don't want to be at the top by myself. I want to be able to share the top with everybody around me. I want us all to have boats. You know what I mean? It's boatsies. And so that's really what our nonprofit organization is about. I have a beautiful team. I am so excited for the work that we're doing, the work that we have coming up, because we're really trying to turn this into a cultural movement. It's more than just having, you know, our community forums. It's really about having that change in the arts. And it's not just about the traditional nonprofit route. We are really trying to make that change, and in so many different forms. So I'm really excited for us. I'm really
excited for you all, and I can just like see the passion on your face right now, which is like so rewarding to know that you're like so passionate about this, because it sounds like a dope project. Like so far you guys have accomplished so much. So we'll make sure we have all of your website and your, you know, all the contact information for you as well as Roya and the show notes, because this is so dope. To get a little bit back on your art, you've created a couple of video trailers for your writing, and you also mentioned, you know, kind of having a visual around, you know, the performance of poetry. Can you explain the importance of pairing visuals with your writing?
Yeah, I love visual poetry. I think that if you're not somebody who just wants to hear it, you're more of a visual type of person. I love pairing the two, because especially adding subtitles, I think is really important as well. Having captioning, because it allows somebody who maybe is a visual person and wants to watch photo videos to sort of draw themselves into that. And if you want to read the text, it's there. If you want to hear my voice, it's there. So there's so many different ways for you to experience that art. And it's really meant to be an experience. And I like to sort of change it up. And I have a couple of projects in the works, more videos coming up. And I think it's important to diversify how you put your art out there. And I think pairing poetry with some type of visual, whatever that looks like, adds an element to the story. Because think of it like watching a music video, right? Like a really, really like inspiring music video. And you're like, wow, that was incredible. And you hear the words, you hear the beat, and it's just this entire movie, like 2-minute movie you're watching. And that's all you need to get your message across. So if you can get your message across through listening to poetry, through watching the poetry, because I don't need to have the captioning, right? I could just have my voice over it. But then if somebody is more comfortable reading the poetry, I'd rather have that accessible too. So I found sort of my love for creating the visual poetry. And I also find myself captivated by it when I watch like other people who have visual poetry as well. So it's really about being captivating and really having that full round experience for somebody to sort of throw themselves into.
Oh, so to go back to your book, because that's really what's so amazing that you have a book that's out. I know like all the other stuff is amazing too, but that's like recent. So let's just make sure people get the book. What do you want folks to take away from Speechless?
I just want them to experience a life that's different than theirs and understand. Because I think that there is a stigma around immigration in America. There definitely is. There aren't that many sort of, I don't want to say resources, but not a lot of people know what autism is, what autism looks like. And I want it to be a learning experience. That's really what the takeaway is. I want somebody to read this book. And I've had people reach out to me and say, like, I really liked your book and I learned so much. And that is what the book was for me. It was more so, what should I include in this book? Let's like, even breaking it down, like, what do I want to include in it? Because I'm very intentional with the stories that I tell. And I think it's so important to be intentional, because I had like a whole diary plus like notes all over my computer of my mom's story. And I think the hardest part, everything was in chronological order. Like I put everything in chronological order. And the hardest part was figuring out what not to leave out and what to keep in. Because I wanted each story to have a purpose. And I didn't want to have standalone stories, even though it might be, or it might seem as standalone, but there's always something that connects.
Right.
And there's some sort of underlying theme that is the reason why I told a story. So I really want it to be a learning experience, and I want people to really understand what people go through when they immigrate to a country like America, and sort of debunking the myths behind it. And so like there's so much stigma, and people don't really understand why people do what they do. And understanding perspective, that is so important to me, because we are all so different from each other, and all we really need to do is listen. I think people love to talk, but it's so important to listen before you speak, because you don't know what somebody is going through, and you don't know why they're doing what they're doing. So that's why they say innocent until proven guilty. We want to hear what you have to say first. And so I just want this to be a learning. I want it to be a learning experience, and I want someone to understand somebody else's story, because there are a lot of other stories. And you're going to meet so many different people who have similar stories, or, and it's just important to have perspective. And that's really what I want people to take away from it.
So, I mean, from just talking with you over the last 20, 30 minutes, I am so excited to finish the book. I'm so excited to recommend it to my fellow educators, because not only hearing the story of children of immigrant parents or children that immigrated themselves, that's something that resonates with a lot of us BPS teachers deeply, because we are teaching so many of those students. And on top of it, there is not much written about kids of color with autism. And I am really excited to hear that perspective, because oftentimes kids of color, if they have any kind of learning disorder or any kind of thing that might hold them back, it's looked as them acting out, and they get in trouble. And it's been so much of my work as an educator to ensure that I treat, my Black and brown kids I really see them. And I'm excited to hear how you see your brother, and how I can learn from that. So I'm excited about that.
Really appreciate it. Yeah. And thank you for all the work you do being an educator. It takes a lot, and it's impacting the kids, long term. And when you asked me when I first started writing, I instantly remember the teacher that I loved. I know her name, and I will never forget that. And being an educator, I think, is one of the most rewarding things.
Oh yeah, for sure.
In anybody's life. Oh yeah. Like, ask anybody, who was your favorite teacher growing up, and they know instantly off the top of their head. Oh, favorite,
Yeah. Awesome. So it's been great talking with you. And the last question I have is, what's next for you and your work, and where can the people find you? Or more so, where do you want to be found on the interweb? Obviously not in person.
So my address.
Yeah, just show up, pull up.
Party at my house. Yeah. So like I said earlier, we have some really great events coming up with Roya. Have our upcoming Starlight Slam at Starlight Square September 4th from 6 to 9. We have incredible featured artists, an open mic, and it's really an opportunity for community engagement, networking, and just really being one with everybody, So I'm really excited for that. Stay tuned. I am coming out with more poetry videos, more poetry to come, in different art forms. I'll just add. So I guess my website people can find me at is esmaalitim.com. You can also email me. My email is on my website. My Instagram is Essmaa, YESS_MAA. Yeah, also I think my email's attached to my Instagram as well. So you can reach out.
We'll put it in the show notes. Yeah.
I'm just trying to think about am I missing anything?
Do you have an Instagram for Roya, or
having a book talk later this fall at West Museum, so stay tuned for that. And I will also be hosting another book talk in New York late fall. So I will keep you guys posted on that. Everything's still in the works, so that's sort of short-term goals, but definitely stay tuned.
Yeah, give us all, the posters. We'll post them. We love doing that. Well, thank you so much for speaking with me this morning. It was a pleasure, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much for having me. Y'all are amazing. I'm so excited to hear this and just share it with the world and just continue growing as one.
Oh.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Do I just hang up?
No, sorry.